Something that's always interested me is mental illness and how it's been perceived and attempted to be treated throughout history, especially schizophrenia and the various others that sort of inflict states of psychosis or, deal with that external reality losing contact with the person's perception. They lose, this world as it is. And I find it so very fascinating and really stark. I think it was Nelson Mandela, I want to say, who says you can judge the entire state of a nation or a civilization on how they treat their weakest, how they, how they care, how they sustain, how they support these people who desperately need it. There's no questions asked on the fact, or no doubts to be raised on the fact that the severely schizophrenic and the severely mentally ill need support. They need some kind of framework. That's a given. But how you do that is the big thing. It is the whole issue. How you do that. You don't baby them, as people think. You don't condescend them. You don't criticize them. You don't treat it as something that lessens their status as a person. You don't dampen them. You don't repress them. You don't hide them away, as was an attempt for many a decade. But you think of how this process has gone. Throughout history, it began thinking it was some kind of imbalance within the body where organs would be removed or parts of the body would be physically, altered in an attempt to fix this imbalance and, correct something. And then there was the thought that, well, maybe it's not that. Maybe we need to, directly affect the brain. So they went in with their shock therapy and their, lobotomies. And I find it absolutely terrifying that probably me and a lot of people I know, would we have been born, 40 to 70 years before, probably would have been subject to lobotomies or shock therapy. But then moving on from there, they went to sort of chemical treatments where they had discovered, or believe they discovered, it was chemical imbalance. And now we have the SSRIs, the antipsychotics, and all these substances which are supposed to be taken as treatment. It's very similar thought process to the original treatment, which was altering an actual physical imbalance by removing something. Instead of removing something, now it's adding a chemical. They're still along that same train, and I find that fascinating, how we went really, really far just to come really, really close back to where we began. And, it's still definitely a stigmatized issue. There's huge stigma when anyone brings up just the word mental illness. And, people are still very highly likely to be labelled, insane or crazy for, any form of mental illness when they are, other than that fact, practically functioning and, suitably seen. But we've come a long way, definitely, to the fact where, one, they would have been persecuted in the very past, and, before that, locked away. People are still locked away for mental illness. Psych wards aren't, the golden places we think they are. From people I know and from experiences I've heard, and, they don't really work all the time. They really don't, and there's huge failings, and it really does seem like people are just put in, pushed through, and then let out without, adequate treatment. We don't cure mental illness, and of course we can't cure mental illness. There's no way we could, as far as we know, but, with symptom detainment and sort of functional therapies that work through, when we came up as a society with psychoanalysis, we thought that might be, an actual breakthrough, but, we still have these huge glaring problems, and they go so unnoticed, they go so deeply stretched, and they go so wrong so fast. We obviously aren't as far as we need to be. Of course, it's destined to always be an occurrence in society, but is there some way that by destigmatizing it, by decentralizing it and unpersonalizing mental illness, could we find a further step to fix it, to better treat it without having some sort of it's a problem, perception. It's an issue. It's not to be solved, just forgotten, or just not looked directly at. Is there some way? And I'm sure somewhere there is, and somehow we find that when we begin treating it as not a person's sanity, but as, a piece of our world. It is something incredibly prevalent. It is something experienced by a very, very big, even though a minority, a very big slice of our population. The wonders that would occur if we could somehow better sort it out, fix it better than we do now, would be, they're currently things we couldn't even imagine. They're unconscionable right now.